She already ducked in. I'm afraid to yell because then I will start coughing. Oh, okay, all right, well, we'll call it good then. All right, everyone, welcome. It is Thursday, February 15th, 2024, and this meeting of the MAPC Advanced Plans Committee is called to order. Start with roll call. Deborah Foster is here. Chuck Warren.
Here.
Joe Johnson. Here. Hugh Nix.
Here.
Cindy Miles.
Present.
John McKay.
Here.
Tony Zimbelman. Here. And we have an extra, Bob Duell.
Here.
Which, if Cindy has to leave, we may need, but we have a quorum of 7. We'll call it right now, right? We don't count our extra until we need him? Okay. All right. Our first and major only item on this agenda is solar energy in the county moratorium. Justin is going to fill us in on the text changes to the zoning regulations that we would like to possibly recommend.
Good morning, everybody. Justin Constantino with the Planning Department. I will keep the presentation fairly brief, but just a recap on kind of where we've been, and we'll soon go into the text changes directly. But just a quick disclaimer, Sedgwick County Solar Moratorium allows a legislative review. We are not currently considering any specific solar applications as part of this process. So just to reiterate, we have not received any solar applications thus far. The current draft changes would be for both Sedgwick County and for the city, and this topic does not include accessory uses. It pertains specifically to large-scale utility solar only. Next slide, please. Where we're currently at in the process, we are still getting feedback from citizen advisory boards as well as district advisory boards, but we are currently at the stage where the Advanced Plans Committee will be making a recommendation to the full MAPC. Next slide, please. Here's a quick schedule of where we are. Obviously, today is the 15th, where we have called this special meeting to review the text. On the 22nd, the MAPC, the Fall Planning Commission, will be reviewing the recommendation of the Advanced Plans Committee. We still have a couple further presentations going on during the tail end of February. On the 26th, we'll be presenting to Citizen Advisory Board 1. We'll be presenting to the Wichita Sustainability Integration Board as well. And then early March, we still have a couple more presentations to both District Advisory Board 5 and Citizen Advisory Board 2. The Board of County Commissioners will be reviewing this item on March 6th with the moratorium expiration on March 20th. Next slide, please. Just so you all are aware, there's been a lot of information, a lot of work done on this particular topic. All of that information is available on our websites at wichita.gov. We have a solar town hall report. We've done an online survey report, best practices report, and public input report. Next slide, please. We've received a lot of public input throughout this entire process. It's been very important and very helpful. As I mentioned before, we have done a public survey. We've done a town hall. We've received over 100 letters and emails on this topic. We've received several in-person comments as well as several comments from elected and appointed officials. Next slide, please. The solar themes that we've kind of boiled down to and have done further research on have been urban development and growth, decommissioning, groundwater contamination, setback, size, and configuration. Next slide, please. And I will go through each of those, or at least the text and how those were either incorporated or not incorporated into the text. You all have that text in front of you. I will take it page by page. There's 5 pages here. Before I dive into it, I will note that throughout this process, no changes have been proposed to the comprehensive plan document from this group. So all of these changes are proposed for the Unified Zoning Code specifically. So I'll go through each of these pages and we can discuss that. If you have any questions on each page, you're more than welcome to stop and ask me any questions. I'll start on the first page. Generally, this is just kind of the overview of renewable energy systems. It contains the definition of renewable energy systems. It discusses that wind energy conversion systems are prohibited. Not a lot of changes on this particular page. There was one little minor text edit regarding the planning director. We crossed out director and put department. So no major changes on this particular page. Next slide, please. So this slide, this page deals particularly with groundwater and soil testing. Basically, we are requiring that the applicant provide safety data sheets or other similar information on the construction materials proposed to be used for the solar project. We are requesting that the applicant provide information and test results of any soil and groundwater testing required by the appropriate governing body. The testing of soil and groundwater will be based on contaminants of concern as listed as an EPA regulated contaminant related to the specific site. The evaluation of the test results will be based on current EPA regulations in effect at the time of the tests, which are subject to change. For groundwater, we have language in there regarding decommissioning and reclamation, as well as language stating that for soil testing, it shall occur only as reasonably requested by the Director of the Sedgwick County Department of Environmental Resources and Household Hazardous Waste for properties in the unincorporated county, or the stormwater engineer from the Public Works Department for properties in the city in relation to spillage. Or any other extenuating circumstance in the area that suggests that the soil may have been compromised or contaminated. Let's go to the next page, please. This page, not a lot of changes, but it does incorporate some of the size and configuration discussions that we've had. Just a reminder, not a lot of changes suggested by this group to the Unified Zoning Code, but we did make an amendment on item K, stating that the solar project shall not exceed 25 feet in height. That was changed from 35 feet. And then we also added a section down below under R regarding review. There was some discussion amongst this group regarding review from the fire department, that the project review and approval shall be by the Wichita Fire Department for properties in the city, or Sedgwick County Fire District Number 1 for properties in the unincorporated county. Any issue of noncompliance shall be specifically articulated. So that is the section that we added on fire. The next page, page 4, deals primarily with decommissioning. There was a lot of discussion amongst this group regarding decommissioning. We are requesting that an applicant provide a decommissioning and reclamation plan. That does not change from our current regulations. We are requesting that the required decommissioning and reclamation plan be submitted by the applicant and shall include financial assurance that the decommissioning and reclamation plan will be completed in accordance with the plan. The amount of financial assurance shall be the full amount of estimated decommissioning and reclamation cost without regard to the possibility of salvage value. There is language in there as well that the estimated decommissioning and reclamation cost shall be recalculated every 5 years, at which time the applicant shall deposit additional surety if and in the amount that the new cost estimate exceeds the existing financial assurance. We also included additional information regarding financial assurance, stating that the required financial assurance may be provided in the form of a surety bond, cash held in escrow, or any other financial instrument acceptable to the appropriate governing body. We also included language stating that if in the form of a surety bond, then said bond shall either 1, not have an expiration date, 2, may only be released with consent of the obligee, or 3 is callable if not renewed within 60 days prior to expiration. If in the form of cash held in escrow or other financial instrument, then said financial assurance shall either 1, may only be released with the consent of the obligee, or 2 is callable if not renewed within 60 days prior to the expiration. We have language in there, what would occur if the applicant is not in compliance with the decommissioning and reclamation plan. Let's go to the next slide, please, which should be page 5. There's some further language there regarding decommissioning. We are requiring a statement or proposed agreement that provides that the appropriate governing body will be notified in the event of any change of ownership of the solar project. There is also a required financial assurance that shall remain in full force and effect and will survive any change of ownership of the project. Any new owner of the project shall be bound by and fulfill all terms and conditions of the required financial assurance. There shall also be a statement or proposed agreement that sets forth the duration of the decommissioning and reclamation process. This shall include the date of the commencement of the project and when the decommissioning will be completed. The dates shall be consistent and in conformance with the approved plan. There shall also be a statement or proposed agreement that the appropriate governing body will be notified on or about 6 months prior to, at the commencement of, and at the completion of the decommissioning. And a statement or proposed agreement which provides that all equipment or structures and any portions thereof are located below grade shall be removed to a minimum depth of 4 feet. And there is language stating that any of the aforementioned statements or proposed agreements shall be binding upon the applicant or any new owner of the solar project. That pretty much sums up the changes. I went through those rather quickly, but we have discussed those at length. I will stop there. Actually, prior to stopping, I will note that Chairperson Foster had a couple minor text edits regarding these proposed regulations. I'm open to questions, or I'm also obviously opening the floor to any additional comments.
Well, I, of course, was trained by David. For those of you who were around when David was here, you know what he's like. So I have a couple more questions. On page 2, under the section, second half for groundwater, number 2, for soil testing shall only occur as reasonably requested, but when you said it, you said testing only shall occur as reasonably requested. Does it matter whether the only is in front of or behind the word occur from a legal perspective? Can I ask our lawyers if that's something that needs to be specifically looked at, or doesn't it matter?
Kirk Sponsor, Deputy County Councilor. As the text is formally written right now, it indicates for soil, testing shall only occur as reasonably requested, and so on and so forth.
So it doesn't make any legal difference if only would come after occur, only as reasonably requested. I'm not sure, I'm asking. I don't know whether it needs to be different or not. And the other question I had, just in a general sort of sense, sometimes in this, the language of dealing with the plan, the decommissioning and reclamation plan, sometimes I'm not sure that it talks about the plan or as opposed to referencing the implementation of the plan. And I just would like that to be very clear as to which we're talking about whenever the plan is mentioned. Does anybody else have any questions or comments on this? Has everybody had a chance to really read it? I know we only just got our hands on it yesterday, so.
Kirk Sponsor, Deputy County Councilor. Going back to your original question, Chair Foster, I don't know that in the long run it would make a huge difference. My preference would be that the word only comes before occur.
All right, I'm fine with that if you're happy.
Chair Foster, if I may, and Justin, you may have covered this, but I wanted to point out the changes, the text that's bold, italics, red, those are the changes since and after our last meeting, specifically.
Yep, thanks, JR.
Thank you.
Okay, yep, Mr., whoops, okay, Tony.
On page 5, under the number 4 statement, I thought we had some conversation about this, that the duration of the decommissioning and reclamation process, I mean, they can figure that out. But then we said that shall include the date of commencement. I thought we decided that nobody's going to know how long this is going to last when we start. So how can they possibly give a date of decommissioning? I thought we decided that wasn't necessary.
Good question. I'm not sure of the answer.
As I recall, there was quite a bit of discussion about that, and that's why I included the word duration, because that seemed to be what was important, is that that the duration be specified. Because I remember commenting that if there's a start date and an end date, then we already have the duration, but I went ahead and included the word duration to make it clear. I don't recall that we were going to eliminate those dates, but I'm getting old. I could be mistaken.
John?
I think during the discussion, we talked about the fact that it can be extended, come in and make amendments to it. I think when we were talking about the dates, because that was something that, when we were discussing it, the question that just came up, how can you say here to here and you really don't know?
Yeah, my recollection now that I've had a minute to think about it is that we talked about, especially since we're asking for financial sureties, there's got to be some sort of estimated duration of the project starting right from the beginning. But as long as we built in the 5-year reviews and the option to change it as necessary, I think that takes care of the doubts we had when we first started discussing it. Does that seem to be a reasonable recollection of, we've talked about a lot over the last several months, so.
Tony, what's your thought on that?
Does that make sense to you? Is it, I mean, it's a good question, but I think that's how we arrived at our eventual decision to have it in there, but just have the 5-year reviews to allow revisions if necessary.
I'm okay with that. I just don't think it reads like that is what I'm saying. So
Okay,
we can interpret it however we want, I suppose.
all right. Any other comments from anybody on the committee? All right, thank you all.
JR, you wrote it. Did you not?
Yes, sir. I put the physical words on paper. Yes.
So whether we include a start and stop date is something we don't want to do, really. I mean, you worked around that language, did you not?
Kirk Sponson, Deputy County Councilor. These are fair questions being raised. I think there are a couple of components here that could be analyzed in which the wording could be altered. The first is that this date of commencement of decommissioning reclamation process could reflect in relation to when the actual SECS project ends in terms of the actual production of energy and the sale of energy, things of that nature. And it also could be, language could be included wherein an estimate of the end date of the project might be given if possible or if applicable, because certainly there is an opportunity for people to, potentially plan for these projects to go on in perpetuity, right?
Okay.
I have one question.
Oh,
In relation to that, would that be covered under the land lease and go and coincide with the land lease?
The land leases themselves are going to be third-party agreements, and so I wouldn't recommend we base our code provisions on a private agreement language.
Okay, any other comments, questions? Justin, I think it's back to you.
Sure. So that pretty much wraps up my presentation. I have a couple other slides just reiterating the timeline and the process. But as far as text changes go, I don't have anything else further to present.
All right, then, John?
I just want to make sure that at this point in time, nobody's made application for the program.
That is correct. We have not received any applications.
Normally, when we change something in the middle of the stream, something could be grandfathered, so there's nothing there to be grandfathered, correct?
Correct. We have not received any applications regarding large-scale utility solar.
Okay, our recommended action in this case is to recommend the changes to the zoning code for the full MAPC to consider next week, bearing in mind that there will be additional review by our legal scholars here, correct?
Kirk Sponson, Deputy County Councilor. Yes, if it were the will of the board, especially in relation to that language concerning the decommissioning and reclamation process, I think it could simply be, you could wait for me to come out with the exact language right now, or you could move to approve the proposed language while giving legal counsel artistic ability to fashion language responsive to the present intent of the board.
Yeah, that's my intent is that we make sure that the content, the goals expressed in this are what we have talked about, what we think needs to be in there, and leave the attorneys to do what attorneys do best to get the language written in the way that will achieve the goals that we've asked them to achieve. So I think we're pretty much there. I do want to have public input before we vote on this, unless there are more questions or comments from people on the committee. Justin, are you ready to step aside and let some public input happen? All right, is there any member of the public here in chambers who would like to speak on this item? Please come up to the podium. You have 3 minutes and start with your name and address, please. Your time will show on the screen.
Hello, my name is Jane Burns. I live in East Central Wichita. I have solar panels on my roof. There are 8 small panels, and I have a very small roof. I am joyous that this solar widespread effort is going forward. Many of us are of a certain age, let's say over 50. We had childhoods where our parents and caregivers gave us resources for a successful future. This is a resource for a world that's changed dramatically from our own childhoods. Me growing up north of North High. Don't know where you grew up, but it's considerably different. The planet, our city, our energy sources. I'm a dietitian. I teach the science of staying well through self-care. One element is the choices that we choose to put into our mouths that change this into the science that runs our body. The science of the future is considerably different than the science of our own childhoods. Solar panels is preparing our children's and grandchildren's and great-grandchildren's future far more wisely than we ever knew before. We are over fossil fuel and their associated pollutions. We're ready to harvest the free energy of the sun to give us all the comforts that we now enjoy. Even more than I had as a child. We have air conditioning. Isn't it wonderful that we'll have the warmth from the sun running our own air conditioners, keeping us cool? Are there any questions?
Any questions for the speaker? Thank you, Jane.
Thank you so much for enabling industrial solar power. Thank you.
All right, any other members of the public? Please come up to the podium. You have 3 minutes. Start with your name and address, please.
My name is Kent Rowe. I live at 3353 North 159th Street East. It's right on the Wichita-Sedgwick County line. I have here a map of Kansas. It's one of 6 states that prohibit third-party power purchase agreements. That keeps solar expansion down in this state. It's repressive, and we're trying to change it. There is a bill up in Topeka now in which will ameliorate this. The landowners that have this property in question need to have a rehabilitation of their soil apart from farming and to be spared from expansive growth that we call growth. The soil needs to rest. Wildlife needs to become more prolific. We need those kinds of areas butterfly dells, pollinator gardens, wildlife spaces that this has. Bifacial solar panels allow that sunlight and those things to grow. So I wrote a series of articles after I presented to the School of Business here at WSU about supply chain technology, sustainable supply chain, that the soil is our supply chain that we need to preserve, that we're losing at an alarming rate in this nation. And it's called Fill 'em Up on Physics. And a new article, New Frameworks in Renewable Energy, We're Not in Kansas Anymore, published in Smart Energy Decisions in August 2022, transmits a growing opposition to anything but oil and gas for our nation's energy needs. Despite empirical evidence that renewables are cleaner, cheaper, smarter, and generate far more jobs, certain segments of the population continue to blather the dark fairy tale of fossil fuel. Seems reasoning based on cognitive unidirectional power flow in one single relay of our central nervous system. That is, there is a lack of robustness in brain redundancy, which have tripped out of section. The result of billionaires' dark money has had an overcurrent polarizing potential to influence into a culture of make-believe, in which we, the largest consumer per capita of energy on the planet, can go on forever. We can't, and we already may have gone too far to restore a back tie. Due to continued burning of fossil fuels, the planet has far surpassed CO2 levels in which the oceans were, quote, 80 feet higher than they are now, wildfires burning out of control, mass migrations, food and water shortages, and storms capable of leveling cities. We know this fuse-blowing evidence from geographical findings in sediments, paleoanthropology, and archaeology. These discoveries should, if fully realized, overheat us to our own statter cores.
Excuse me, but you're out of time. Can you wind up, please?
I understand that knowledge is incongruent with preconceived notions, produces harmonic distortions in our thought process. So thank you, and I hope to speak to you all again, lest I meet my maker whilst flipping a faulty breaker. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the speaker? All right, thank you. Anyone else in the audience? Please step up to the podium. Let's start with you and then we'll go over here. Name and address, please.
My name is Annetta Teeting. My address is 5728 West 151st Street North. I got that backwards. Anyway, my house is going to be surrounded by solar panels on all 4 sides. And I understand the solar panels are going to be 25 feet within, probably 25 feet tall within 40 feet of my property. So I am personally involved in this whole thing. Here's what I want to know. Here's what I want to tell you that I think is of vital interest to everyone in this room. And I'm going to read it so that I do not make a mistake. The Public Service Company of Oklahoma, an American Electric Power subsidiary, plans to spend almost $2.5 billion to buy 3 wind and 3 solar generating facilities totaling roughly 995.5 megawatts to be built by Invenergy, according to filings with the Oklahoma Corporation Commission. PSO expects the planned projects in Kansas and Texas, 553 megawatts of wind and 442.5 megawatts of solar will produce $1 billion in federal tax credits. The projects are set to be operating before January 2026 and produce a 2.1% rate increase that year, according to the utility. PSO's ownership of the renewable resources will be beneficial for customers by supplying needed capacity and fuel-free energy, the utility said in a filing. Adding additional renewable resources to meet PSO's capacity needs will help contribute to PSO's customers achieving their carbon reduction goals and provide additional opportunities for economic development activities. What I want to point out to you is that the money trail leads back to PSO, not Invenergy. It is important, before you make a final decision, that you have PSO involved in the information they need to give you. You need to know what $2.5 billion is going to be spent on in Kansas and Texas. if they are the ones who are actually funding the project, the promises need to be made with PSO. That's all.
Thank you. Any questions for the speaker? All right, anyone else in the member of the public who would like to speak on this item? Come up to the podium, name and address, please.
And while they're walking up, Kirk Sponsor, Deputy County Councilor, just based on some comments that have already occurred, my recommendation is that specific projects or sites or businesses not be considered as part of this legislative review process. Also, I'd recommend that consideration of where energy is going also not be considered as part of this. There are certain federal implications. Thank you.
Yes, I would just remind everyone on the committee, we're looking at revisions to the zoning regulations. That's our job here today. We're not talking about a specific solar project. All right, would you speak, please?
Yes, hi. My name is Meredith Abdu, 1401 17th Street. I do work for Invenergy, and so I have been involved in the development of solar in Sedgwick County. And so I just want to say one, thank you. I know we heard from one of our landowners, Andy Albert, last week. You guys have taken on a lot, and you have increased the frequency of your meetings, and you have allowed a lot of public comment to come in. So we appreciate you taking the time to do that. And then I just wanted to address one of the members' questions, Mr. McKay specifically. You asked about, are there any applications? And I know Kirk is going to slap my hand because we are keeping this, general and not project specific. But I would say that from our perspective, and I know we've spoken on this in the past, there is development that's going on in Sedgwick County, and it's been going on for a number of years, 5 years, and that's been presented to the county, and we've worked with the staff, and we've appreciated all the information that the staff has provided us. And so we have, the reason an application hasn't been submitted is because the moratorium was put in place that said there is a pause on processing all applications. And so we wanted to let that play out. But I just want to be clear that, there is risk here, and we've talked about 5 years and a potential capital investment of $200 million coming into the county. So I just wanted to say that, and happy to take any questions you may have.
Any questions for the speaker? Hugh?
Yeah, I don't want to get in trouble with Kirk, but what does pre-leased agreements mean?
Whatever that would entail, Kirk Sponsor, Deputy County Councilor, whatever that might or might not entail would likely be a third-party agreement that wouldn't impact our considerations here.
But nonetheless, we have a lot of pre going on and have for some time. Not actual, but pre, hypothetically.
It's possible.
All right, any other questions for the speaker? Thank you. Is there any other member of the public here who would like to speak on this item? Name and address, 3 minutes, please.
My name is Walt Chappell. I live here in Wichita, and I've been resident here since 1955. So I have seen this community grow over a period of years. We have a number of outlying communities that have, of course, grown in that period as well. And so I compliment you for coming up with some very realistic guidelines for these kinds of projects. And I hope that they will be able to facilitate some development of energy over the coming years. Let me point out too that we have 3 substations in the county. These projects will normally be placed near them because of transmission costs. Once you put a solar array out in a field, you've got to have enough collectors. We've talked about that before. But now you have to be able to connect to the grid. And the good news is that they have prepaid agreements so that a company in Oklahoma or a manufacturing facility in Kansas City or right here, Spirit Aerospace in Wichita, will do the purchase of the electricity at a given rate. So they know what their price is going to be, but it all goes into the grid. And that grid is the Southwest Power Pool. So whether it's the Wolf Creek plant or whether it's a coal-fired plant, or whether it's a gas-fired or solar arrays, all of those electrons go into the same grid. So in reality, a company in Oklahoma, in this case, one example, would be paying for a facility built in Sedgwick County. We get the benefit of the taxes. As soon as that property is appraised at industrial and commercial use instead of farming use, your rate goes up right from the start. And the company that puts those collectors in will be paying that higher rate, the property taxes to the county and also to the school districts nearby. So these are all benefits we have as part of these kinds of projects. So not only do we help our planet, do we help our industry, but we have electricity that allows us to grow our economy in Sedgwick County. And by the way, there's a little cherry on top. A lot of these collectors are going on metal racking, they call it, right? So you've got to have some way to attach it to the ground and the pylons. And then you have the racking. We have so many metal fabricators in Wichita and Sedgwick County. These guys are going to be able to make a lot of money making the infrastructure basically to hold these panels up. That's jobs for our people. That's electricity for our county. And I thank you so much for allowing these kinds of projects to move forward. It's a blessing to all of us.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
You have the question. Go ahead, sir.
So I've kind of forgotten a few things. So how big are the solar panels?
Pardon?
How large are the solar panels right now?
You know, these panels are, in my estimation, the projects I've worked around are only about 15 feet high. Now, you put a limit of 25. That's something that will allow for some additional equipment on top. But in terms of height, that would be the height. But they're also then based upon the angle of the sun. In the winters, they're laid back, and coming forward, you're going back and forth throughout the seasons. So that height varies, is my point.
Yeah, my point is how large are they? How wide are they? How tall are they? The actual panel themselves.
Well,
How big are they?
I don't know specifically for any particular project. The manufacturers, some of these are 4x8, some are 4x10, 12, 15. They vary in size depending upon the configuration.
Okay, well, you're the scientist. I mean, and
Excuse me, but can you talk into your mic?
Thank you.
sorry about that. We're all hard of hearing, aren't we? So in 10 or 15 years, they're going to be half the size?
Oh, no.
The science says that it's not possible? Is that what you're saying?
They're fixed at the time you put them on the racks, right?
I understand, but will solar panels shrink in size over
Oh, no,
time?
sir. No, they're glass, they're metal, they're all encased in frames. There's no way anything inside the panel would ever leak out.
My cell phone's a lot smaller than it was 10 or 15 years ago. I'm just saying.
I didn't understand your question.
I'm saying my cell phone's a lot smaller than it was 10 or 15 years ago. I mean, it's not possible for solar panels to shrink in size? That's all I'm asking you.
I would guess that if they did shrink in size, they just put more of them up and thereby generate more energy in the
create the
same
same amount
area.
of power, we need less land. That's all I'm saying.
Or more
I don't know the
energy,
answer to
depending. Okay.
Once they're installed, they have no shrinkage, right? They're already fixed once you put them out. Maybe I misunderstood your question.
The other thing that I've lost somewhere is that I think you supplied the form, but we were making comparisons of Kansas versus Oklahoma versus Colorado, whatever.
Yes, sir. We're 46th in the nation right now.
Where's
We're close to the
Oklahoma?
bottom.
Where's
Pardon?
Oklahoma on that chart?
I forget. I can
Well,
pull
I
it up on my
can
sheet.
tell you
and
there's
look at
either
it.
one above or one below.
Yeah, the point is somebody is buying the electricity at a fixed rate. They try to do this so that the financing works out with the bank. You don't ever get a project installed unless it's paid for, right? And you have to make it make financial sense. That means you have to have enough collector area before you ever go start digging anything. You don't install one panel if you can't get it financed.
That's okay. I don't like comparing Kansas to any other state because the variables are just immense. And trying to do so just continues to degrade all of us that live in Kansas. That's what I think.
I don't think that's what we are or should be doing. We're talking about
That's
ours.
what I want to talk about, and that's it. I'm done. Okay?
and it's absolutely your right to talk about it. I'm just saying we're talking right now about changing our zoning regulations. And that would
The
apply.
speakers are not talking about that.
I know they're not, but I can't control what the speakers
Well,
say.
then I can ask questions of the speakers based on what they're saying.
Okay.
So I compliment you for working on zoning regulations that will allow an industry to come to Sedgwick County that helps build us economically in the future and provides electricity for the people throughout this region. It's not just one area. It's going through the grid to all who need it.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
All right. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak on this item? All right. Seeing none, let's bring it back.
And Kirk Sponson, Deputy County Councilor, if I may interject momentarily, there was some language that was presented, and Susan Erlenwine informed me of this, so please correct me if I'm misstating anything. But for full disclosure, my understanding is that there was some other communication with staff regarding the soil and water testing and potentially the actual capability of any solar project to have laid out all of its materials as part of the application itself. Is that correct, Susan? Is that okay? She is nodding her head. That is accurate. Based off of that, based off of the question of whether or not it is actually realistic that somebody have every single one of their materials laid out prior to construction and during the application process, were it in the interest of the board, there might be some potential language for sections F and sections G1B. So section F, the first sentence presently reads, the applicant shall provide safety data sheets or other similar information on the construction materials proposed to be used in the SCCS. A potential change could just be for it to read, the applicant shall provide information on the construction materials generally anticipated to be used in the SCCS. So that still gives them a concept for the indicated personnel to work with, whereas not putting in overburden on any potential applicants. In conjunction with that, section G1B would state as written, but an additional sentence would be added to the end of subsection B that says, prior to any scheduled testing, applicant shall inform the above designated individual of any substantial changes to construction materials. Testing for additional contaminants may be required if directly and reasonably related to changes in the construction materials used. And so conceptually, that doesn't allow anybody in the county to deny any type of construction materials being used, but it does give us periodic notice of any changes to construction materials that may impact the things to be tested for.
I have a question.
Joe?
JR, do we require this on buildings?
Well, I'm not in the MABCD, but I don't think so. I wouldn't state that affirmatively, though.
I think you're right. Why would we do it on this? I don't know where we're coming from on this material testing.
And I would defer more to Susan Erlenwine at that point for the concepts around the propriety or the impropriety of it.
Susan, would you care to come up and respond to the...
And I would just offer, even before Susan starts, Scott Wadle, Planning Director, I would just offer that through the process, during the public comment periods, we've received input about concerns about groundwater and soil contamination. And so that has been some of the background through these input sessions and prior meetings and comments that I think is kind of built to having this language in here. So with that background in terms of the public input process.
Right. Susan Erlenwine, Director of Environmental Resources. When we reviewed all of the comments, as Scott just mentioned, groundwater was something that kept coming up over and over about certain chemicals might contaminate the groundwater, especially if it's shallow groundwater at a specific site. I have no plan to ask any company to test the periodic table of chemicals or combinations thereof. It's to look at what materials might be used at the site, and reasonably, they will not know when they're applying for an application, just like when you build a home, you work with a contractor, but you don't know who the plumber is or the electrician or what materials they're using at the time of the application. So I'm trying to be reasonable for the company to say, what materials are you using or suspect you might be using? And then if it's a substantial change, let me know about it later. And we would base testing on any chemicals of concern, and that will help the people who live in the area and also protect the company to know if any pollution would occur. And if it occurs and they find it, was it related to the solar farm or not? And this material list would show yes or no, they had nothing to do with that chemical.
All right, thank you, Susan. Any questions for Susan? Thank you. All right, I think we are at the point, the purpose of this whole months-long process has been for us to try and get the content of revisions to the zoning changes to deal with commercial solar to the point where we can recommend to MAPC the language of actual zoning regulation changes. And given the understanding that our legal departments are still reviewing these and there may be some minor changes to the text to more precisely create the rules that will achieve the goals we've said we want to achieve, are we ready to make a motion and move that we recommend to MAPC that these changes to the zoning regulations be approved?
I'm not.
All right, Joe, what do you still think we need to do before you're ready?
Because I think there's a lot of red herrings here. Things that have nothing to do with solar. They're just things that people put in there because they didn't want solar. And I don't see any reason that we treat a solar field any differently than we do a building. And throughout this whole thing, groundwater, for instance. What do we do when we build a building?
I agree, and I think we have, in a number of instances, decided not to layer on additional regulation or additional changes and simply said that the processes and regulations we already have in place are doing the job. I will say that the difference between a building and a commercial solar farm is one of scale. Unless it's an awfully big building or an awfully small solar farm, it really is just a matter of the amount of ground covered.
I disagree. When you go out and build a whole subdivision of housing, that's just the same size as a solar field.
Point. All right, any other questions or comments? Chuck?
I would move that we take the recommended action, including changes to paragraphs F and G as delineated by our attorney.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion from Mr. Warren and a second from Ms. Miles to...
Sorry, point of clarification, Kirk Sponsor, again, sorry to hop in. Does that also include further working of the language in V4 regarding the duration of decommissioning?
Yes, it does.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
All right, I'm not going to try and repeat that motion, but does it need to be clarified, or is everybody clear on what the motion is? All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed say no.
No.
All right, I believe that carries 6-1. All right. John?
The motion was that we could take it to the planning commission for final approval. Then it goes on to the county. Does the city see it at all
They will. We don't have them on the schedule because we want to see how things go at the county level first, and then we'll put that together in terms of the schedule and when that would go to the city council. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Because I believe it was the county commission that actually asked for the moratorium, correct?
That's correct. It's the county, the moratorium only applies in the county.
Okay,
The
I believe we're done
unincorporated
with
county.
that. Is there anybody
Yes,
here,
sir.
member of the public who would like to?
Unincorporated county.
Oop, I'm sorry, Joe?
Clarified that it's the unincorporated county, not, because
Yes.
city's certainly in the county.
Yes, unincorporated county. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Is there anyone else, member of the public here, who would like to speak on something unrelated to solar? All right, thank you for that. All right, our next meeting is not until Thursday, March 14th. We had one scheduled for next week for this committee. No, March 14th. So almost a month from now. And that is at 10 a.m. here in this room. Any other business we need to deal with? Seeing none, meeting adjourned. Thank you all.
20 seconds. Yes.